the author of Chasdei David begins to summarize for us the teachings of the Arizal with the following words: B'tchilat hakol, in the beginning of everything, Haya'or Ein Sof Baruch Hu, there was the infinite light of the Ein Sof. And we also learn that the Ein Sof was Pshut, a word we'll soon define in its proper context. Additionally, we are told that in the beginning, Ve'ein davar panui mimenu, that is to say, there was nothing devoid of the infinite presence of the Ein Sof. And as we are about to learn and experience together, in these few words, the Arizal teaches us some of the most fundamental principles about the nature of the Creator. The very first principle that we'll clarify is that before everything, not only before the creation of our physical world, but even before the creation of all the spiritual worlds as well, and even before the creation of the very first set of 10 Sefirot, known as the 10 emanations, before all of that, there was only one thing and one existence. This exclusive existence is what the Kabbalists call the Ein Sof, or the light of the Ein Sof. And of course, we are speaking of the infinite existence of the Creator, as Ein Sof means infinite. And the very first thing that we need to clarify regarding the term Ein Sof is that in truth, Ein Sof isn't really one of the names of the Creator. What is it then? The term Ein Sof means infinity. Inasmuch, this term is used by the Kabbalists whenever they refer to the Creator in terms of His infinite existence. Nevertheless, it is only by way of reference that they use the term Ein Sof, but not as one of His holy names. However, let it be known that when the Kabbalists do speak of the Creator's infinity, they may actually be referring to more than one aspect of His infinity. Of course, the first and most often mentioned aspect of the Creator's infinity is the fact that His existence is truly infinite. As we know that He always existed in the past, still currently exists in the present, and always will exist in the future. If so, then we can surely say that the existence of the Creator could be called a necessary existence, as pointed out by the Ramchal in the beginning of his book, Derech Hashem, since after all the Creator must always exist, and that of course is a function of infinity. But that's only the first reason. The second reason for which the Creator is called Ein Sof encompasses another aspect of the Creator's infinity, an aspect which isn't very well known to the Torah world at large. And as we are about to learn, this aspect of His infinity is conveyed by the Arizal in the word Pshut. Simply put, the word Pshut could be translated as simple or straightforward, but that is a far cry from what the Arizal intended to convey to us when he used this term with regards to the infinite Creator. In order to understand the Arizal's intention in calling the Creator Pshut, we'll have to pause for a while and clarify this matter in depth. And if you ask me, understanding this concept is one of the deepest and one of the hardest secrets to properly grasp. Why so? Because this concept defines a fine difference between the Creator on the one hand and all of His creations on the other hand, even the most spiritual worlds and all their Sefirot. Where am I going with this? My goal is to bring to your attention that all the creations, beginning with the most physical creations that we find in our physical world, and all the way to the holy names, which are also creations, as we'll eventually learn, as well as all the Sefirot that make up the spiritual worlds, all of them have a beginning and an end, as only the Creator has no beginning and no end. And if you'll insist on asking me, so what's so difficult to understand? I'll clarify that I wasn't implying that it is difficult to believe that the Creator is infinite, as even the Gentile philosophers have come to the conclusion that there must certainly be a primordial existence that preceded everything else, who always was and always will be. But the point that I actually wanted to bring to your attention is just how difficult it is for our limited human brain to understand the nature of this infinite existence. Additionally, I wanted to stress to you just how removed from our feeble human mind is the understanding of how and where all the eventual creations were before they were actually created, when the only thing that existed was the infinite creator. And although at the end of the day, human beings are truly restricted in their mental ability to grasp exactly how and where all the eventual creations were before they were actually created, nevertheless, the Arizal sums up everything that human beings can actually understand regarding the relationship between the infinite creator and all the future creations in one single word: Pshut. This is why we were taught that in the beginning of everything, the light of the Ein Sof was Pshut. And in my humble opinion, I believe that we can simplify the Arizal's intention in telling us that the Ein Sof is Pshut with the following parable. Let us take this box for example, which, as we can see, contains many objects that would later on come out of it. And of course, the comparison is to the infinite creator that all the creations would eventually come out of during their eventual creation, be it all the holy names, or all the worlds and all the sephirot that make up those worlds. Now, I'll ask you the following question. Does the fact that all of the creations must have certainly come out of the Creator necessitate us to say that all of these creations were deposited inside of the Creator, so to speak, the way all of these objects are deposited in our allegorical box, until the time came for each and every single one of them to come out during their creation? If so, that would insinuate that inside the Creator there are actually as many internal subdivisions as the number of creations that would eventually come out of Him. But if that's the case, then we would end up with the understanding that the Creator was actually comprised of all these parts until He eventually unloaded them, i.e., until He, so to speak, gave birth to them. If so, then that certainly isn't what you would call Pshut, but rather Murkav and complex. So what is called Pshut? And how does the Arizal want us to understand the Creator's existence in relation to all the creations before they were created? In order to begin understanding all of the above, we'll continue with our artistic liberty and refer back to the parable of the box. Believe it or not, this box is actually supposed to simulate the nature of the Creator that all the creations must have certainly come out of. After all, where else could all of these creations have come from, if not from this box, which, as we said, so to speak, represents the Creator? And of course, it is needless to say that the Creator surely is not a box, nor does He have any other shapes or dimensions. However, all of the kabbalistic secrets in the Zohar and the writings of the Arizal are expressed by means of a parable, and therefore we'll also continue that tradition by offering parables of our own as we progress together in our learning. Having clarified that, we'll now take a peek into our box with the eye of our mind, and so to speak examine its contents. And what do we see? Nothing but the Creator Himself. Yes, this is a taste of what the Arizal termed Pshut. In other words, with the help of this diagram, we should be able to appreciate that the Creator really has no subdivisions whatsoever. And not only that, but when we take to heart that we are actually speaking about the Creator even before the creations came out of Him, we should be able to appreciate that all of these future creations were not really inside of the Creator, were they? At least not the way we would expect them to be, since after all, they must have all come out of Him. If so, that begs the obvious question, where were they then? Since all of the future creations are nowhere to be seen in our illustration, we must therefore conclude that they were not actually inside the Ein Sof, at least not the way we would expect them to be. And why is that? Because by definition, the Creator does not contain anything else, since after all, He is Pshut. And as we learned before, the Ein Sof is definitely not Murkav, since after all, He is not made out of any parts, not even the creations that would later on come out of Him. In summary, the point I'm trying to make here is that this is yet another form of infinity. Namely, since the nature of infinity is to stretch out to anywhere and everywhere, therefore that leaves no room whatsoever for anything else to exist within this ever-stretching infinity. Therefore, although we know that all the creations must have certainly come out of the Creator, nevertheless, we cannot really say that they were contained within the infinite Creator before He created them, can we? In summary then, the nature of a Pshut existence is to be non-compartmentalized, allowing no room for any subdivisions whatsoever within its infinite existence. And that is exactly what the Arizal wanted to impress upon us, that in the very beginning, the infinite Creator was one unified existence, to the point that even all His future creations were completely one and with the Pshut existence of the Ein Sof. And by now, you should all be able to see with the eye of your mind how this feature of the Ein Sof is also a form of infinity, since by definition, anything which is not Pshut but rather Murkav certainly cannot be infinite. And in my opinion, we can offer yet another parable to help us understand even better the Pshut nature of the Ein Sof. After all, it cannot be a coincidence that the Kabbalists chose to refer to the infinite Creator as light, as Or HaEin Sof. And certainly it goes without saying that the physical sunlight that illuminates our physical world is definitely a physical light and not a spiritual light. And especially since the scientists have recently discovered that the physical light isn't merely waves of energy, but is also made up of tiny physical particles. Nevertheless, the Kabbalists have chosen to refer to the Creator as a light for the simple reason that our light is the least physical of all the physical things that we find in our physical world. And based on that comparison, the Kabbalists wanted to impress upon us that the spiritual Creator is also as removed as could be from our physical world. And when we look inside the writings of the Ramak, we find several more reasons offered to explain why the Kabbalists chose to use the parable of our physical light in order to describe the infinite Creator. And since it is obviously the custom of the Kabbalists to use light as their favorite parable for the Ein Sof, we'll also take the liberty to add yet another explanation of our own as to why the Creator is referred to as light. What aspect of light am I referring to? I'd like to bring to your attention that the physical white light that we are accustomed to seeing every day of our lives actually has a feature that is somewhat similar to the Pshut nature of the Creator. In what way? Because upon first impression, the natural physical light appears to be one coherent, unified light without any subdivisions whatsoever. And although surely when we split the natural white light by using a prism or by rainwater to give the rainbow effect, we definitely see how in truth the natural white light isn't as Pshut as we thought it was before we split it into its many colorful components. Nevertheless, until the white light was actually split, it surely appeared to us as one coherent, unified light without any subdivisions whatsoever. In short, the natural physical white light certainly seems to be Pshut, at least upon first impression. If so, we now understand even better why the Kabbalists chose to use light as their main parable in order to convey the nature of the infinite Creator. Namely, that just like the natural light seems to be Pshut and non-divisible, so too the Creator must certainly be Pshut and non-divisible. And now that we've clarified the Arizal's intention in the term Pshut, we should be able to appreciate that although certainly all of the creations, both physical and spiritual creations, must have come out of the Creator, nevertheless, before their creation, they were not contained or boxed inside the Creator the way, for example, an embryo is contained or boxed inside his mother's womb, or the way a small fish is swallowed up inside the innards of a bigger fish. If so, where were all of the creations before they were finally created? In truth, before their creation, all of the future creations were still one and with the infinite Creator, as it would definitely be incorrect to look at them as if they were deposited, so to speak, somewhere inside the infinite Creator. And why is that? Because if we would dare suggest that the future creations were actually somewhere inside of the Creator, that would certainly imply that the Creator isn't infinite. Since after all, according to this suggestion, he has an area inside of him that isn't actually him, but rather of his future creations. If so, with that, we would in fact be suggesting that his existence does not stretch out infinitely. Therefore, the Arizal immediately negates any such misconceptions by clarifying that in the beginning of everything, the light of the Ein Sof was Pshut. And after clarifying that there was absolutely nothing inside of the Creator before the creations were created by him, we continue to learn that ve'en davar panui mimenu, that there was nothing devoid of his infinite existence. In other words, he was everywhere. And that shouldn't really surprise us, since we already learned that in the beginning there was only one single existence, without any exceptions whatsoever. That is the existence of the infinite Creator. If so, we can say that not only was the Creator everywhere, but he was also everything. In other words, ein davar panui mimenu. And this is why the Kabbalists refer to the Creator as Ein Sof, which literally means no end or no boundaries. As after all, the Creator's existence truly has no boundaries whatsoever. If so, it is only natural to induce that his infinite existence must necessarily be everywhere, which of course means that there was nothing devoid of the Creator's existence. And if you've been paying careful attention to everything we've been learning here, we seem to be saying an incredible chidush, an insight which seems to contradict the very famous adage about the very first act of creation. As we must have all learned before, it is commonly understood that the very first act of creation was yesh me'ain, literally something from nothing. So what's the seeming contradiction? The famous adage, something from nothing, would indicate that in the very beginning there was absolutely nothing, until the act of creation gave birth to the first something. But wait a minute. Did we not just learn that in the very beginning there was actually something, namely the existence of the infinite Creator, who the Kabbalists call the Ein Sof? Surely the Creator should be considered as something, shouldn't he? And since that's obviously the case, that begs the obvious question: where did the first nothing come from, and when? In the near future, we'll surely address both of these questions. However, even before we do so, you should already be able to appreciate the point I was hoping to raise, that in the very beginning of everything, there definitely was something. If so, why do we find the phrase something from nothing in relation to the very first act of creation? We should know that the phrase something from nothing, yesh me'ain, is actually referring only to the creation of the physical matter in Olam Ha'asiyah, which, as we'll learn, is actually the very last world to be created. Indeed, regarding the physical matter, we can surely say that its creation was literally something from nothing, since before the physical matter was created, it surely did not exist. Therefore, its creation truly was something from nothing. But that wasn't the very first act of creation that we are currently speaking of.